The recommendation that destroyed me. I died 3 days before the college entrance examination results were released. At the time, everyone in Haiching believed I was a shameless cheater. My name had once been displayed on the honor board of Haiching No. 1 High School. Lin Shi, first place in the provincial mathematics competition. Lin Shi, winner of the National Youth Innovation Award. Lin Shi, recommended student of Jingbei University. Later, the school covered my photograph with a piece of white paper. Underneath it, someone had written 4 words in red marker: plagiarist, liar, disgrace. My classmates cursed me in the class group. My teachers refused to answer my calls. Even the parents, who had once asked me to tutor their children, posted online, claiming they had always known there was something wrong with my character. Only I knew the truth. I had never plagiarized anyone. The research report that won the national gold medal had been written by me. The experimental data had been collected by me. The program had been designed by me. But the final certificate carried another person's name: Gui Chen, the son of Gu Mingde, the principal of Haiching No. 1 High School. The person who helped him steal everything from me was my best friend, Shen Mengyao. That night, I stood outside the school laboratory, clutching a flash drive containing all my original records. The laboratory door was locked. Through the glass, I could see Gui Chen and Shen Mengyao sitting together. They were laughing. On the table between them was the university admission notice that should have belonged to me. I raised my hand and knocked on the glass. Shen Mengyao turned around. For a moment, her smile froze. Then she walked over and opened the door. Lin Shi. She glanced at the flash drive in my hand. Her expression changed immediately. What are you doing here? I'm going to the Education Bureau. My voice was hoarse. I have the original experimental records, the revision history, and the messages Teacher Gao sent me. I can prove that Gu Yichen stole my project. Gu Yichen leaned back in his chair. He did not look nervous. Instead, he laughed. Go ahead. I stared at him. He pointed toward the corridor behind me. At the end of the corridor stood 2 police officers. The school has already reported you for stealing confidential examination materials. He smiled. The files in your hand belong to the Jingbei Talent Program. You secretly copied them and attempted to sell them. Every computer record proves it. That's impossible. My hands trembled. I created those files. Can you prove it? He tilted his head. Your school account has been deleted. Your laboratory access records are gone. The computer you used has been reformatted. My heart sank. I looked at Shen Mengyao. She avoided my eyes. Suddenly, I understood. You deleted them. She bit her lip. Lin Shi. Stop fighting. Why? I stepped toward her. We grew up together. I helped you with every competition. I shared all my notes with you when your father was hospitalized. My parents lent your family money. My voice broke. Why did you help them destroy me? Shen Mengyao remained silent for a long time. Then she looked up. There was no guilt in her eyes, only resentment. Because I was tired of living behind you. I froze. She continued. No matter how hard I worked, the teachers only praised you. When we won a group competition, everyone said it was because of Lin Shi. When I ranked 10th, my mother asked why I couldn't be first like Lin Shi. When boys gave me love letters, they always asked about you. Afterward, her eyes gradually turned red. You had everything: good grades, loving parents, teachers who trusted you, and a future everyone envied. I just wanted to see what you looked like. After losing it all, my chest felt as if it had been torn open. So you gave my research to Gu Yichen? He promised me a place at Jingbei University. She smiled faintly. And, after you disappear, I'll become the school's new outstanding student. I finally realized that the person standing before me was not the gentle girl who used to share an umbrella with me after school. Perhaps that girl had never existed. The police officers walked toward me. I turned and ran. I did not know where I was going. I only knew that I could not let them take the flash drive. It contained the last proof of my innocence. Outside the school gate, rain poured down. Reporters surrounded the entrance. The moment they saw me, they rushed forward. Lin Shi, did you steal Gu Yichen's research? Did you obtain the recommendation through fraud? Is it true that your parents bribed teachers? Why did you frame your classmates? Their questions came one after another. Someone pushed me. I stumbled into the road. A horn screamed through the rain. Before I could turn around, a truck struck me. My body flew through the air. The flash drive slipped from my hand and disappeared into the gutter. As darkness swallowed me, I heard Shen Mingyao's voice from behind the crowd. Lin Shi, don't blame me. You were always too lucky. This time, it's my turn. When I opened my eyes again, the classroom was filled with applause. I stared at the blackboard. The date written in the upper right corner was May 16th, 32 days before the college entrance examination, and 3 days before the school selected its recommended student for the Jingbei Talent Program. I had returned. I had been reborn. Lin Shi, our homeroom teacher, Qin Feng, smiled at me from the podium. Why are you staring into space? The principal just announced that our school has received 1 recommendation place from Jingbei University. Everyone turned toward me. Qin Feng continued, you have the best grades and the strongest competition record in the school. As long as you submit your application, this place will most likely be yours. Applause filled the classroom again. In my previous life, I had stood up excitedly. I had believed this recommendation was the reward for 12 years of hard work. I had immediately signed the application. Then I withdrew from the normal college entrance examination preparation class and entered the closed Jingbei Talent Program. That was the beginning of my nightmare. This time, I looked at the golden application form in Chen Feng's hand. Then I turned toward the girl sitting beside me. Shen Mingyao's eyes were fixed on the form. Greed flashed across her face. The next second, I heard a voice. It was clearly Shen Mingyao's voice, but her lips had not moved. The recommendation should have been mine. In my previous life, Lin Shi took everything. This time, I'll steal her research proposal first. My fingers slowly tightened around my pen. So she had also been reborn. She believed I had enjoyed a glorious future. After receiving the recommendation, she did not know that the shining road she envied led directly into a trap. I lowered my head, hiding the cold smile on my lips. Shen Mingyao, since you want it so badly, I will give it to you. I only hope you can endure everything that comes. With it, she stole my research. After class, Qin Feng called me into the office. She placed the application form in front of me. Lin Shi, this is a rare opportunity. The recommended student can enter Jingbei University without taking the college entrance examination. You'll also join Professor Gao Wenba's national research team. Professor Gao Wenba. Hearing that name again made my blood run cold. In my previous life, Gao Wenba had treated me kindly. When I first entered the program, he praised my intelligence. He introduced me to famous professors. He even told my parents that I was the most gifted student he had seen in 10 years. My parents cried with joy. They had no idea that, after the laboratory doors closed, Gao Wenba became a different person. He made me complete Gui Chen's projects. He forced me to alter experimental data. Whenever I refused, he threatened to cancel my recommendation and demand 3 million yuan in compensation from my family. The agreement stated that any student who damaged the reputation of the program would bear all financial losses. My father sold our apartment to pay the first penalty. My mother became ill from stress. I worked day and night, believing that as long as I endured until university began, everything would improve. Instead, they made me the scapegoat for their academic fraud. Teacher Chen, I pushed the form back. I don't want to apply. Her smile disappeared. What did you say? I want to take the college entrance examination. She stared at me in disbelief. Do you understand what you're giving up? Yes. Jingbei University is one of the best universities in the country. Even with your grades, there is no guarantee you'll be admitted through the examination. I understand. Qin Feng frowned. Did your parents tell you to refuse? No. This is my decision. Why? I could not tell her the truth. In my previous life, Qin Feng had tried to defend me. After the scandal, the principal had transferred her to a remote school. I did not want to drag her into danger. Before I had enough evidence, I want to prove myself through the examination. She studied me for a long time. Finally, she sighed. Think about it carefully. The application deadline is tomorrow. When I returned to the classroom, Shin Mengyao immediately leaned toward me. What did Teacher Chen say? She asked me to apply. Her fingers tightened. Are you going to? I deliberately hesitated. I haven't decided. Relief flashed in her eyes. She quickly hid it and held my arm. Of course you should apply. You've worked so hard. No one deserves it more than you. Her voice was as gentle as before, but inside her mind, I heard something completely different. Pretend all you want. Tonight, I'll take your research proposal. Without it, let's see how you pass the interview. Ismail Daher. You're right. That evening, I returned home and opened the locked drawer beneath my desk. Inside was a blue notebook. It contained my research proposal for a low-cost campus water purification system. In my previous life, this proposal had impressed Gao Wenba and secured my recommendation. Later, Gu Yichen stole the completed project and used it to win a national award. Shen Mengyao had secretly photographed every page and sent it to him. This time, I placed the notebook in the most obvious position on my desk. Then I removed the real notebook from my school bag. The blue notebook on the desk was a copy I had prepared during lunch. The first half contained my original proposal. The second half contained several carefully designed errors. The errors were not obvious. A high school student could easily overlook them. But if someone used the proposal in an actual experiment, the filtration material would release excessive aluminum ions into the water. It would not seriously harm anyone, because the experiment would be stopped during testing. However, it would prove that the person presenting the project did not understand the basic chemical principles behind it. At 8 that night, Shin Mengyao sent me a message. Lin Shi, can I come over? I left my English notebook in your bag. I replied immediately. Sure. I'm going downstairs to buy fruit. My mother is in the kitchen. Get it yourself. I left the apartment, but did not go far. I stood on the stairwell between the 4th and 5th floors. 5 minutes later, Shin Mengyao arrived. She entered my room through the camera I had placed on the bookshelf. I watched her open my school bag. Then she searched my desk. When she found the blue notebook, her eyes lit up. She quickly photographed every page. Before leaving, she even deleted the photographs from my cloud-connected tablet, believing she had erased all evidence. I watched her walk downstairs with a satisfied smile. In my previous life, I had trusted her so completely that I never suspected her. This time, every movement she made was recorded, but I did not intend to expose her yet. A fish had finally taken the bait. Why would I pull the line before it had swallowed the hook? The next morning, Chen Fang entered the classroom with 2 application forms. Since Lin, she has not submitted her form. Another student has applied. Shin Mengyao stood up. I want to compete for the recommendation. Whispers filled the classroom. Someone laughed. Mengyao, this isn't a popularity contest. You need an independent research project. Shen Mengyao lifted her chin. I have one. She walked to the podium and placed a blue folder on Chen Fang's desk. My project is a low-cost campus water purification system. The classroom fell silent. Several students turned toward me. They knew I had been researching the same topic. Chen Fang opened the folder. Her expression gradually became serious. Did you design this yourself? Yes, Shen Mengyao answered, without hesitation. I've been working on it secretly for more than a year. My desk mate, Zhou Jing, frowned. But Lin Shi told us about this idea last semester. Shen Mengyao's eyes immediately turned red. Lin Shi and I are best friends. We discussed many ideas together. Maybe she misunderstood. She looked at me helplessly. Lin Shi, you know I started this project first. Don't you? Everyone waited for my response. In my previous life, I would have exposed her on the spot. This time, I smiled. Yes. The room exploded. Zhou Jing grabbed my sleeve. Lin Shi, what are you saying? I ignored her. I looked directly at Shen Mengyao. The project belongs to Mengyao. She stared at me, clearly surprised by how easily I surrendered. Then her inner voice rang in my ears. She must be afraid. She knows she can't defeat me. Without the notebook. Good. From now on, everything she had will belong to me. Chen Fang looked troubled. Lin Shi, are you certain? I'm certain. Then will you still apply? I shook my head. No, Shen Mengyao tried to hide her smile. The principal announced the result that afternoon. Shen Mengyao became the school's only candidate for the Jingbei University recommendation. When she returned to the classroom, everyone surrounded her. Congratulations! You won't need to take the college entrance examination. Don't forget us. After you entered Jingbei University, she accepted their praise with a modest expression. Then she walked to my desk. Lin Shi, I'm sorry. I didn't expect you to withdraw. Her voice was filled with false guilt. If I had known, I wouldn't have submitted my project. I packed my examination papers into my bag. You should be happy. She lowered her voice. Aren't you angry? Why would I be angry? You received what you wanted. I looked into her eyes. I hope you'll never regret it. Her expression stiffened. Then she laughed. Regret? I'm going to Jingbei University. You're the one who will regret giving it up. Perhaps she was right. Someone would regret it, but it would not be me. The whole school mocked me. Within 3 days, the story spread throughout the school. The version everyone heard was completely different from the truth. According to the rumors, I had tried to steal Shen Mingyao's research project. After she produced evidence, I became frightened and withdrew from the recommendation competition. Some students claimed I had always been jealous of her. Others said my previous competition awards might also have been stolen. The person who spread the rumors was Shen Mengyao. But whenever anyone asked her directly, she would sigh and defend me. Please don't say that about Lin Shi. She's my best friend. Even if she made a mistake, I believe she didn't mean to hurt me. The more she defended me, the guiltier I appeared. At lunch, 2 girls deliberately stopped beside my table. One person is going to Jingbei University. The other still has to fight through the college entrance examination. What a difference! I continued eating. Zhou Jing slammed her chopsticks onto the table. Do you have nothing better to do? The girls rolled their eyes and walked away. Zhou Jing sat opposite me. Why aren't you explaining? Because it isn't necessary. Everyone thinks you stole her project. They can think whatever they want. She stared at me. You've changed. I looked up. How? You used to care about what everyone thought. In the past, if someone misunderstood you, you wouldn't sleep until you explained everything. I smiled. I finally realized that some people don't want the truth. They only want an exciting story. Zhou Jing lowered her voice. Was the project really hers? I did not answer directly. Instead, I asked, Do you trust me? Yes. She answered immediately. Then wait. For what? For her to prove the truth herself. That afternoon, Shen Mengyao was called to the principal's office. When she returned, she wore a limited edition watch on her wrist. Everyone gathered around her. She smiled and explained. Principal Gu gave it to me as encouragement. Someone gasped. That watch costs more than 20,000 yuan. Shen Mengyao quickly covered it. It's not that expensive. Her eyes drifted toward me. She wanted to see jealousy. I gave her none. The next day, a black luxury car arrived outside the school. Gu Yichen stepped out. He was tall, handsome, and famous throughout Haiqing's elite schools. His father was the principal. His mother owned several private education companies. He had already been admitted to Jingbei University through a special athletics program, even though his grades barely reached the middle of our class. In my previous life, Gu Yichen had approached me the same way. He had praised my research and invited me to join his team. I believed he respected my ability. Only later did I learn that he needed someone to complete his assignments. Now, he walked straight toward Shen Mengyao. You're the recommended student? She nodded nervously. I'm Shen Mengyao. Gu Yichen glanced at the folder in her arms. My father showed me your proposal. It's interesting. Her face flushed. Thank you. Professor Gao wants to meet you this weekend. He opened the passenger door. I'll take you to the university laboratory. The students nearby stared in envy. Shen Mengyao looked back at me. Before entering the car, her inner voice was almost singing. Lin, she spent her entire previous life trying to reach this level. Now I've achieved it in 3 days. This is what it feels like to be chosen. I watched the car drive away. Zhou Jing whispered. She looks like she's already become a celebrity. She's happy too early. What do you mean? I opened my mathematics workbook. Nothing. In my previous life, during my first visit to the laboratory, Gao Wenba had asked me to complete a surprise test. He gave me 4 hours to improve a purification model. Because I had designed the project myself, I succeeded. That success made him decide I was useful. Shin Mengyao had memorized my proposal, but she did not understand it. I wondered what expression she would make. When Gao Wenba asked her to explain the flawed second half, on Monday morning, Shin Mengyao did not come to school. She sent a photograph to the class group. She was sitting inside a luxurious laboratory, wearing a white coat. Beside her stood Gui Chen and Gao Wenba. The caption read, "A new beginning. Thank you to everyone who believes in me." Dozens of classmates praised her. At noon, another photograph appeared. This time, she was crying. Her hand was bandaged. She wrote, "Experiments are difficult, but I won't give up. Success always requires sacrifice." Everyone comforted her. Only I noticed that the glass container behind her was filled with cloudy liquid. The purification experiment had failed. That evening, she came to my house. The moment I opened the door, she pushed past me. "Lin Shi, there's something wrong with the notebook." I closed the door calmly. "What notebook?" "The water purification proposal." She immediately realized she had exposed herself. Her face changed. "I mean the proposal we discussed before. You said it was yours." She clenched her teeth. "I designed the project, but you helped organize some details." "Which details are wrong?" "The ratio of aluminum sulfate to activated carbon." She stared at me. "When I followed the formula, the water became cloudy." I pretended to think. "Maybe you made a mistake." "I didn't." Her voice rose. "Professor Gao asked me to explain the ion exchange process." I couldn't answer. "That's strange." I smiled. "You worked on the project for more than a year. How could you not answer?" Her face turned pale. For a moment, anger twisted her features. Then she softened her voice. "Lin Shi, we're best friends. If I enter Jingbei University, I'll definitely help you in the future. Can you give me your complete experimental records?" I looked at her. In my previous life, she had smiled at me in exactly the same way. Before stealing my final report, I shook my head. "I don't have them." "You're lying. The project belongs to you." "Why would I have the records?" She opened her mouth, but could not respond. I stepped aside and opened the door. "I still have examination papers to finish. You should go." Her eyes filled with hatred. "Lin Shi, are you doing this on purpose?" "Doing what?" "You deliberately gave me the wrong formula." I laughed. "But you said you created the formula yourself." Her face turned completely white. I lowered my voice. "Shen Mengyao, lies are difficult to maintain. You should be more careful." She left, without another word. That night, I heard glass shatter in the apartment next door. Her mother, Lu Fong, screamed at her for embarrassing herself before Professor Gao. 10 minutes later, Lu Fong knocked on our door. My mother opened it. Lu Fong pointed at me. "Lin Shi, Meng Yao said you hid important research data from her." My mother frowned. "Wasn't the project Meng Yao's?" Lu Fong's expression stiffened. "She designed the main idea. Your daughter only helped with some details. Then she should complete it herself." My mother tried to close the door. Lu Fong blocked it with her foot. "Your daughter already gave up the recommendation. Why is she still trying to sabotage Meng Yao?" I walked out of my room. "Aunt Lu, do you have evidence that I sabotaged her?" "You?" "The school application states that the project was independently completed by Shen Mengyao." I took out my phone. Should I call Teacher Chen and ask her to correct the application? Lu Fong immediately fell silent. If the school discovered the project was not independent, Shen Mengyao would lose the recommendation. I smiled. "Aunt Lu, Mengyao is about to enter Jingbei University. She should learn to solve her own problems." Lu Fong glared at me. "You're jealous. My daughter has a bright future. You'll still be sitting in an examination hall next month." My mother became angry, but I gently pulled her back. I looked at Lu Fong's proud face. "That's right. I'll take the examination. Let's compare our futures after the results are released." She gave up the college entrance examination 1 week. Before the examination, the school held a farewell ceremony for the senior students. Principal Gu Mingde stood on the stage. Behind him was a giant screen showing photographs of outstanding students. Shen Mingyao's photograph appeared in the center. Mine had been removed. Today, we are especially proud of Shen Mingyao. Principal Gu smiled. She has received preliminary approval from Jingbei University's talent program. As long as she passes the final project assessment, she will be directly admitted. The auditorium erupted in applause. Shen Mingyao walked onto the stage in a new school uniform. Gu Yichen personally handed her a bouquet. The host asked, "Mingyao, do you have anything to say to the students who are about to take the examination?" She held the microphone. Everyone has a different path. Some people can only change their lives through an examination. Others may receive opportunities because of talent. She looked directly at me. I hope everyone can accept the gap between people and stop wasting energy on jealousy. Several students laughed. Zhou Jing cursed under her breath. I remained calm. The host continued, "Will you still take the college entrance examination?" Shen Mingyao smiled. "No, my place at Jingbei University is almost confirmed. I want to devote all my time to the national project assessment." Another wave of envy spread through the auditorium, but my heart felt strangely peaceful. In my previous life, I had made the same choice. I stopped attending normal classes. I handed in a formal withdrawal from the examination. I believe there was no reason to waste time preparing for an exam I no longer needed. When the program later accused me of fraud, I had no examination score and no university offer. I lost every path forward. Now Shen Mingyao had willingly made the same decision. After the ceremony, she stopped me outside the auditorium. "Lin Shi." She held up her withdrawal form. "Do you know what this is?" "Yes. I won't have to enter the examination hall." She smiled. "You'll spend 2 days answering hundreds of questions, but I'll already have 1 foot inside Jingbei University." I zipped my bag. "Congratulations." Her smile faded. "Is that all you have to say?" "What else should I say?" "You should admit that you regret withdrawing." I looked at her for a few seconds. Then I laughed. "You want me to regret it that badly?" She clenched the withdrawal form. "You're pretending to be calm." "Fine." I nodded. "I regret it." Her eyes lit up. I continued. "I regret not giving you the recommendation sooner." Her expression changed. I walked past her. Behind me, she shouted, "Lin Shi, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to catch up with me." I did not turn around. The examination began 7 days later. At 6 in the morning, my mother made dumplings. My father checked my admission ticket at least 10 times. They were more nervous than I was. Before leaving, my mother held my hand. "Cici, don't pressure yourself. Even if you don't enter Jingbei University, we'll still be proud of you." My eyes became warm. In my previous life, my parents had trusted my recommendation completely. When I was accused, they sold everything to protect me. My father begged Principal Gu outside the school gate. My mother visited Gao Wenba every day until security guards dragged her away. I had been so ashamed that I avoided them. I thought my failure had ruined their lives. Only, after dying, did I realize that they had never blamed me. This time, I hugged them. "I'll do well. I promise." When I arrived at the examination center, students filled the entrance. Some were reviewing notes. Some were crying. Some parents held umbrellas and shouted encouragement. Across the road, I saw Shen Mingyao. She was sitting in Gu Yichen's sports car. She wore sunglasses and held an iced drink. When she noticed me, she lowered the window. "Good luck, Lin Shi." Her voice was deliberately loud. "I hope you can at least enter an ordinary university." Several students looked over. I smiled. "I hope you pass your project assessment." For some reason, her hand tightened around the drink. The car drove away. The bell rang. I entered the examination hall. The moment I received the first paper, my heart became completely calm. I had already taken this examination once. After losing the recommendation in my previous life, I had spent countless sleepless nights imagining what would have happened if I had entered the examination hall. I found old papers. I solved every problem. I memorized every mistake. Even after entering the research program, I continued studying in secret, because taking the examination remained my deepest regret. Now, the questions in front of me were familiar. My pen moved steadily across the paper. For 2 days, I forgot Shin Mengyao. I forgot Gui Chen. I forgot my previous death. There was only one thought in my mind. This was my life. No one would steal it again. When the final bell rang, students rushed out of the building. My parents stood outside holding flowers. I ran toward them. For the first time since my rebirth, I truly smiled. That night, Shin Mengyao posted another photograph. She stood beside a giant display board announcing the National Youth Science Finals. Her project title was written in gold letters: a low-cost purification system for rural schools. Underneath it were 3 names: Shen Mengyao, Gui Chen, Professor Gao Wenba. She wrote, "While others finish an examination, I am preparing to change the world." The post received hundreds of likes. I saved a screenshot. Then I opened a folder on my computer. Inside were photographs of my original notebook, timestamp videos, cloud backups, and the recording of Shen Mengyao stealing the proposal from my room. I clicked on a scheduled email. The recipients included the National Youth Science Committee, the Provincial Education Bureau, and the Academic Ethics Office of Jingbei University. The email would be sent automatically on the morning of the final project presentation. Shen Mengyao believed she was preparing to change the world. She did not know that I was preparing to change hers. Her perfect project began to collapse 3 days. After the examination, Gao Wenbo announced that Shen Mengyao's project had entered the national finals. Principal Gu ordered the school to hang a giant banner over the entrance. Warm congratulations to Shen Mengyao for representing Haiqing in the National Youth Science Finals. Lu Fang invited relatives, neighbors, and teachers to a celebration dinner. She deliberately came to our apartment with an invitation. Shishi's examination is over, isn't it? She smiled at my mother. Bring her to Mengyao's celebration. It will be good for her to see what a truly outstanding student can achieve. My mother wanted to refuse. I accepted the invitation. Of course we'll go. That evening, the restaurant entrance was covered with photographs of Shen Mengyao. In every picture, she wore a white laboratory coat. Gui Chen stood beside her. The photographs made them look like 2 young scientific geniuses. When my family entered, Lu Fang immediately led us to the table farthest from the stage. Several relatives whispered, "That's Lin Shi. Wasn't she supposed to receive the recommendation? I heard she tried to steal Mengyao's project. What a pity. Her grades were once so good." I sat down calmly. Halfway through dinner, Lu Fang took the microphone. "Our Mengyao has always been kind. Even after certain people tried to take her research, she chose not to pursue the matter." She looked at my mother. "We believe classmates should give each other a chance." Everyone turned toward us. My father put down his chopsticks. Before he could speak, I stood. "Aunt Lu, are you saying someone stole Mengyao's project?" She smiled triumphantly. "You know exactly what I mean. Then why didn't you report it?" Her smile froze. I continued. "Academic plagiarism is serious. If someone stole the project, you should report it to the competition committee. Would you like me to help you contact them?" The room became quiet. Lu Fang's face darkened. "There's no need to make the situation ugly. But you just announced it in front of everyone." I took out my phone. "Tell me the name of the person who stole the project. I'll send the report now." She could not name me directly. If an investigation began, the committee would request Shen Mengyao's original records. She had none. Shen Mengyao quickly took the microphone. "Lin Shi, today is a happy occasion. My mother only feels sorry for me. Please don't misunderstand." I smiled. "Then I'm glad no one stole your project." I sat down. Lu Fang looked as if she had swallowed a fly. After dinner, Shen Mengyao followed me to the restroom. The moment the door closed, she grabbed my wrist. "What are you trying to do?" "I attended your celebration. You know what I'm asking." Her eyes were filled with panic. "Professor Gao wants the complete experiment log tomorrow." "Give me your records." "No, I'll pay you." "How much?" She hesitated. 20,000. I laughed. "That project can take you to Jingbei University. But my records are worth only 20,000. 50,000. No, 100,000. I removed her hand from my wrist. "You don't have 100,000. Gui Chen will give it to me. Then ask him to complete the project." Her face twisted. "Lin Shi, don't push me. What will you do? I'll tell everyone you stole my idea. You've already done that. She stared at me. I lowered my voice. Shen Mengyao, you wanted the recommendation. You received it. You wanted my project. You took it. You wanted to stand beside Gui Chen. You're standing beside him. Why are you still asking me for help? For the first time, fear appeared in her eyes. Did you know the formula was wrong? I smiled. Without answering. She took one step backward. You deliberately set me up. How could I set you up? With a notebook you claimed was yours. She opened her mouth. No words came out. I walked toward the door. Before leaving, I said, the national finals are next week. You should spend less time celebrating and more time learning your own project. The next morning, she did not come to school. At noon, a rumor spread that she had fainted in the Jingbei laboratory. Gui Chen posted an explanation. Mengyao has worked too hard. Please give her space. The truth was very different. Through a message from a laboratory assistant, who had helped me in my previous life, I learned what had happened. The competition committee had sent experts to inspect the project. They asked Shen Mengyao to repeat a simple experiment. She failed 3 times. Then they asked her why the filtration membrane showed abnormal ion release. She could not answer. Gui Chen tried to interrupt, but the experts insisted that the primary student researcher answer independently. Finally, Shen Mengyao fainted. The experts became suspicious. Gao Wenbo gave her 48 hours to produce complete handwritten records. That evening, she called me 37 times. I did not answer. At midnight, she sent a message. Lin Shi, I know you hate me, but if I lose this recommendation, my life will be ruined. I looked at the screen for a long time. In my previous life, when I begged her to return my original records, she had replied, with one sentence, your life has nothing to do with me. This time, I typed the same words. Your life has nothing to do with me. Then I blocked her number. They tried to make me the scapegoat again the day before the national finals. Principal Gu called me to his office. Gui Chen and Gao Wenbo were already there. Shen Mengyao sat in the corner. Her face was pale. There were dark circles under her eyes. Principal Gu pointed at the chair opposite him. Sit. I remained standing. What do you need? He frowned at my attitude. Lin Shi, the school has investigated the conflict between you and Shen Mengyao. We now believe the research project may have originally involved both of you. Shen Mengyao immediately looked up. I almost laughed. When the project seemed successful, it belonged entirely to her. Now that experts suspected fraud, it suddenly involved both of us. Principal Gu continued, for the reputation of a school, we want you to sign a joint research statement. Gui Chen placed a document on the table. The document listed Shen Mengyao as the principal researcher. Gui Chen was the project leader. My name appeared at the bottom as a technical assistant. More importantly, one clause stated that I had independently managed the experimental data. If the falsified data were discovered, I would bear responsibility. It was almost identical to the trap they had used in my previous life. I looked at Gao Wenbo. He still wore the same gentle smile. Lin Shi, I reviewed your academic record. You are very talented. If you sign the statement and help Mengyao complete tomorrow's presentation, I can offer you a place in another Jingbei University program. Shen Mengyao spoke quickly. You don't even need a high examination score. Professor Gao can arrange everything. I looked at her. So you want me to save you? Her face turned red. This project originally belonged to both of us. No, I shook my head. You told the entire school it belonged to you. That was a misunderstanding. Your mother held a celebration and accused me of plagiarism. She was emotional. You submitted a written statement claiming you independently completed the project. She became silent. Principal Gu slammed the desk. Enough! This is not a negotiation. You are a student of Haiqing No. 1 High School. You have a duty to protect the school's reputation. I looked at him calmly. What happens if I refuse? His expression became cold. Your examination records are still under school management. We can report concerns about your academic integrity to the admissions offices. This was a threat. In my previous life, those words would have terrified me. Now, I took out my phone. Could you repeat that? Principal Gu's expression changed. Gu Yichen immediately stood. Are you recording us? No, I smiled. But the camera above the bookshelf is. Everyone turned. The small red light on the office security camera flashed. Principal Gu's face relaxed. That camera belongs to the school. Correct. I nodded. So the recording will prove that I refused to participate in academic fraud. He finally realized what I meant. If the footage disappeared, it would prove the school had destroyed evidence. Gao Wenba leaned forward. Lin Shi, you're a clever girl. But clever people should understand when to compromise. I compromised in my previous life. The words escaped before I could stop them. Shen Mingyao's head snapped up. Our eyes met. She understood. Her lips began to tremble. You, I smiled at her. Yes, I remember everything. The room fell silent. Gu Yichen frowned. What are you talking about? Neither of us answered. Shen Mengyao stood so quickly that her chair fell. You knew. She pointed at me. You knew what would happen from the beginning. I looked at her coldly. I knew you would steal my notebook. I knew you would take the recommendation. I knew you would withdraw from the college entrance examination. Her face lost all color. You deliberately put the wrong formula in the notebook. I placed my private notebook in my private room. You entered, without permission, and photographed it. That was your choice. She rushed toward me. You ruined me. I stepped aside. She almost fell. I looked down at her. I didn't submit the project in your name. I didn't tell you to lie. I didn't force you to abandon the examination. You ruined yourself. Principal Gu shouted for security. Before anyone arrived, I opened my bag and placed several documents on the desk. The first was a time-stamped copy of my original proposal. The second was the video of Shen Mengyao photographing my notebook. The third contained messages between Gu Yichen and Gao Wenba. In the messages, they discussed assigning the project to Gu Yichen. After it won an award, the laboratory assistant had sent them to me that morning. Gu Yichen stared at the printed messages. His confidence finally disappeared. Where did you get these? Does it matter? I looked at Principal Gu. Copies have already been sent to the competition committee and the education bureau. Gao Wenba stood. You foolish child. Do you think you can defeat us with a few screenshots? No. Ismilat. That's why I sent the original files. His face stiffened. At that moment, someone knocked on the office door. Chinfeng entered, with two officials from the Provincial Education Bureau. Behind them stood 3 members of the competition committee. One of the officials showed his identification. We received a report concerning academic plagiarism, student coercion, and falsified research data. He looked around the room. Professor Gao, Principal Gu, and Gu Yichen, please cooperate with the investigation. Shen Mengyao slowly collapsed into her chair. Her lips moved. No, this can't happen. I'm supposed to go to Jingbei University. No one answered her. The recommendation agreement on the desk suddenly looked like a death sentence. The live stream exposed everything. The investigation should have remained private, but Principal Gu refused to accept defeat. That night, the school released a public statement. It claimed I had become jealous after losing the recommendation and had maliciously fabricated evidence against Shen Mengyao. The statement described Gu Yichen as an innocent student leader. It described Gao Wenba as a respected professor. It described me as emotionally unstable. The school even announced that it would hold an emergency press conference during the national project presentation. Their plan was simple. They wanted to control public opinion. Before the investigation produced a result, in my previous life, they had used the same method. They flooded the internet with rumors. They hired people to attack me. By the time I found evidence, no one wanted to hear it. This time, I was prepared. The national project presentation was live-streamed. Thousands of students, parents, and teachers watched online. Shen Mengyao stood on stage in a white dress. Her face was covered with makeup, but she still looked exhausted. Gu Yichen stood beside her. Gao Wenba sat among the judges. Principal Gu watched from the front row. When the host introduced the project, applause filled the hall. Shen Mengyao began her presentation. The inspiration for this project came from my concern for students in rural areas. She recited the introduction from my notebook word for word. I sat in the last row. Zhou Jing was beside me. She whispered, How can she still present? After the investigation began, because they believe they can win if they finish the livestream. Win what? Public sympathy. On stage, Shin Mengyao reached the technical section. Her voice began to shake. A judge interrupted her. You stated that the membrane uses a layered ion exchange structure. Yes. Please explain why your original formula produced excessive aluminum ions. She glanced at Gao Wenba. He did not look at her. I adjusted the ratio. When? During the second stage. According to your report, the second stage occurred in March. The judge lifted a document. But the school laboratory has no record of you entering. Before May. The hall became quiet. Sweat appeared on Shen Mingyao's forehead. Some records may be missing. Then show us your handwritten notes. She looked toward Principal Gu. He stood. This line of questioning is inappropriate. Mengyao is only a high school student. The judge replied coldly. She's presenting a national award project and applying for direct university admission. She must prove the work is hers. At that moment, the giant screen behind the stage flickered. The presentation disappeared. A video began playing. Shin Mengyao entered my bedroom. She opened my drawer. She photographed the blue notebook page by page. The camera clearly captured her face. Gasps spread through the hall. Online comments exploded across the livestream. She stole it. That's Lin Shi's room. Didn't she claim she worked on the project for a year? The school accused Lin Shi of plagiarism. Shin Mengyao turned toward the screen. No. Turn it off. Gu Yichen rushed toward the control booth. The video changed. Now the screen showed messages between him and Gao Wenba. Gu Yichen, once the project wins, remove Shen Mingyao's name. Gao Wenba, she's only useful for the student category. Gu Yichen, what if she complains? Gao Wenba, the recommendation contract will keep her quiet. Another message appeared. Principal Gu, if anything goes wrong, place responsibility on Lin Shi. She has a technical background. The hall erupted. Reporters stood. Parents shouted. Principal Gu's face turned purple. This is fabricated. I rose from my seat. Every camera turned toward me. I walked onto the stage. The host tried to stop me, but one of the Education Bureau officials motioned for him to step aside. I took the microphone. My name is Lin Shi. This project was based on research I began during my second year of high school. I have the original notebooks, cloud revision history, experiment videos, and teacher feedback. The screen displayed each piece of evidence, dates, signatures, emails. Every record existed months before Shin Mengyao claimed to have started the project. I continued. I withdrew from the recommendation because I discovered that the program agreement allowed the research team to transfer student work without consent. The student would also bear responsibility for any falsified data. The contract appeared on the screen. A lawyer's analysis highlighted the unfair clauses. Parents in the audience began shouting. My daughter applied to that program. Did the school know about these terms? How many students have they used? I looked at Gao Wenba. In the past 5 years, 6 high school students entered Professor Gao's program. 4 later, withdrew from school. 1 was accused of plagiarism. 1 disappeared from public records. The screen showed their names and cases. The laboratory assistant had helped me locate them. 2 former students had agreed to provide statements. Their recorded interviews began playing. 1 girl described working 18 hours a day to complete Gu Yichen's competition papers. Another student said Gao Wenba threatened his family with compensation after he refused to falsify data. The livestream audience passed 1 million. Gao Wenba stood. This is an illegal attack on my reputation. An Education Bureau official walked onto the stage. We have confirmed that the evidence was obtained lawfully. The police and University Ethics Committee have opened a joint investigation. Security officers approached him. For the first time, Gao Wenba looked frightened. Gu Yichen grabbed Shin Mengyao. Tell them Lin, she gave you the project. Tell them she planned everything. Shin Mengyao stared at him. You said I would go to Jingbei University. Her voice was empty. You promised to put my name on the award. Gu Yichen lowered his voice. Do what I say, or you'll receive nothing. She suddenly laughed. Then she slapped him. The sound echoed across the stage. You were going to remove my name. You used me. Gu Yichen pushed her away. You stole the project yourself. You were useful. Because you could pretend to be the original researcher. Did you really think someone like you could join my team? His words were broadcast to everyone. Shen Mengyao stood frozen. The fantasy she had protected since rebirth finally shattered. She had believed she was stealing my glorious life. Only now did she understand. She had volunteered to become their next scapegoat. She begged me to save her. The national competition cancelled Shen Mengyao's qualification that afternoon. Jingbei University withdrew her recommendation. Haiqing No. 1 High School suspended Principal Gu. Gao Wenbo was removed from all teaching and research duties. While the investigation continued, Gu Yichen's special admission was also reviewed. The internet changed direction overnight. The people who had called me a plagiarist began praising my courage. My photograph returned to the school honor board. The giant banner congratulating Shen Mengyao disappeared. But the consequences for her were only beginning. Because she had formally withdrawn from the college entrance examination. She had no examination score. Because she had submitted stolen research. Other special programs refused to consider her. Because the scandal had been live-streamed. Every university admissions office knew her name. 3 days later, Lu Fang knocked on our door. This time, she was not wearing jewelry. Her hair was messy. The moment my mother opened the door, Lu Fang fell to her knees. Please save Mengyao. My mother stepped back in shock. What are you doing? Lu Fang grabbed her trousers. Lin, she has evidence that Mengyao only made one mistake. If she tells the Education Bureau that the girls worked together, Mengyao may still be able to repeat the year. I walked out of my room. Lu Fang immediately crawled toward me. Cici, you and Mengyao grew up together. You're like sisters. She was confused for a moment. She didn't truly want to hurt you. I looked down at the woman who had mocked my parents at the celebration dinner. Aunt Lu, did you believe we were sisters? When you told everyone I stole her project. Her face stiffened. I was angry. When you asked the school to investigate my previous awards, I didn't understand the situation. When you said my family would never compare to yours, tears streamed down her face. I was wrong. Please give Mengyao another chance. Behind her, Shen Mengyao stood in the corridor. She looked thinner. She no longer wore the expensive watch Principal Gu had given her. When our eyes met, hatred flashed across her face. Even now, she did not believe she was wrong. She only regretted failing. I looked at Lu Fang. I won't lie to the investigation team, but I also won't prevent Mengyao from repeating the year if the Education Bureau allows it. Hope appeared on her face. Really? Yes. She stood quickly. I knew you were a good child. Then Shen Mengyao spoke. I won't repeat the year. Lu Fang turned. What are you saying? Shen Mengyao pushed past her and entered our apartment. She stared at me. You're satisfied now, aren't you? I said nothing. You knew everything. You watched me give up the examination. You watched me steal the project. You watched everyone praise me. Her voice became louder. You could have stopped me. I almost laughed. Why would I stop you? Because we were best friends. In my previous life, were we best friends? Her expression froze. I stepped closer. When you deleted my records, were we best friends? When you helped Gu Yichen accuse me, were we best friends? When I stood outside the laboratory, begging you to tell the truth, what did you say? Her lips trembled. I repeated her words. Your life has nothing to do with me. Her face turned white. Lu Fang looked between us. What previous life? Neither of us explained. Shen Mengyao suddenly grabbed my shoulders. I thought you became successful. In my previous life, you received the recommendation. You entered Jingbei University. You appeared in the news. You stood beside famous professors. You had everything. I removed her hands. You only saw what they allowed the public to see. I told her about the forced research, the falsified data, the penalty agreement, my father selling our home, my mother becoming ill, the plagiarism accusation, my death. With every sentence, Shen Mingyao's expression changed. By the end, she could barely stand. So the recommendation was a trap, and Gu Yichen planned to steal the project from the beginning. She covered her face. No, I gave up the examination for nothing. You didn't give it up for nothing. I looked at her coldly. You gave it up Because you wanted to steal my future. You believed you deserved everything I had. You made every choice yourself. She lowered her hands. Her eyes were red. Then why did you expose them? To take back my life. Not to save you. The hatred returned to her face. You used me as bait. Yes. I did not deny it. You knew they would approach you if you took my project. You knew they would reveal their methods. You gave me exactly what I wanted. She staggered backward. I continued. You once said I was too lucky. You wanted my recommendation, my project, and my life. So I gave you the door. You were the one who walked through it. She raised her hand to slap me. My mother caught her wrist. That's enough. My mother's voice was colder than I had ever heard it. My daughter owes you nothing. Lu Feng pulled Shin Mengyao away. Before leaving, Shin Mengyao turned toward me. Lin Shi, don't celebrate too early. The examination results haven't been released. What if you fail? I smiled. Then I'll accept the result. At least the score will be mine. The results were released. The college entrance examination results were released at midnight. My parents sat beside me in front of the computer. The website crashed twice. My father refreshed the page so many times that his hand shook. Finally, the result appeared. Chinese, 139. Mathematics, 150. English, 146. Science, 294. Total score, 729. For several seconds, no one spoke. My mother covered her mouth. My father leaned closer to the screen. 729. I nodded. He checked the number again. Then he suddenly stood and walked into the kitchen. I heard him crying. My mother hugged me. You did it. I closed my eyes. In my previous life, I had never entered the examination hall. The score before me was more than a number. It was the future I had lost. It was proof that I did not need stolen recommendations, powerful families, or unfair contracts. My own ability was enough. At 1 a.m, Chin Fong called. Her voice shook with excitement. Lin Shi, you're the top science student in Haicheng. The provincial ranking hasn't been confirmed, but you may be first in the entire province. By sunrise, reporters had gathered outside our apartment building. This time, they did not call me a plagiarist. They called me the examination champion. Haicheng No. 1 High School immediately hung a new banner. Warm congratulations to Lin Shi for achieving the highest science score in Haicheng. The banner covered the empty space where Shen Mingyao's banner had once hung. Principal Gu was no longer there to give a speech. Shin Fong stood beside me during the interview. A reporter asked, "You were once the strongest candidate for the Jingbei recommendation. Do you regret giving it up?" I looked at the camera. No, why? Because an opportunity is valuable only when it allows you to remain yourself. If someone asks you to surrender your integrity, freedom, or future in exchange for success, it is not an opportunity. It is a trap. The interview spread quickly. That afternoon, Jingbei University contacted me. They offered me admission to their mathematics department with a full scholarship. 3 other top universities also called. My parents placed the brochures across the table and told me to choose freely. No one threatened me. No one demanded a penalty agreement. No one asked me to give away my work. For the first time, every road in front of me belonged to me. Across the corridor, Shen Mingyao's apartment remained dark. After the results were released, Lu Feng stopped leaving home. The relatives, who had attended the celebration dinner, no longer answered her calls. The neighbors, who once praised Shin Mengyao, now whispered whenever they passed her door. 2 days later, Shin Mengyao disappeared. Her mother called the police. They found her at the train station. She had planned to travel to Jingbei and beg Gao Wenbo for help. She still believed he might protect her. But Gao Wenbo had already been detained for questioning. Several former students had come forward. The university discovered that he had used high school students to complete projects for Guichen and other wealthy students. He had falsified competition results and threatened families with illegal contracts. Principal Gu had received money for every student sent into the program. Guichen's admission was cancelled. His previous awards were revoked. The education company, owned by his mother, lost several government contracts. Within a month, the Gu family fell from the center of Haicheng's education circle. 1. Afternoon. Gui Chen waited outside my apartment building. He looked completely different, without the luxury car and expensive clothes. Lin Shi. I walked past him. He blocked my path. I can help you. With what? My family still has connections. He lowered his voice. If you withdraw some evidence, my father may avoid prison. In return, I can ask Jingbei University to give you a better research position. I stared at him. Even after losing everything, he still believed opportunities belonged to his family. You have no position to give me anything. His face darkened. You think a high examination score makes you powerful? No. Ismilat. But it means I don't need you. He grabbed my arm. Before he could speak, 2 police officers approached. They had been investigating his attempt to destroy laboratory evidence. One officer pulled him away. Gui Chen struggled. Lin Shi, you think you won. My family will recover. You'll regret making us your enemy. I watched him being placed inside the police car. In my previous life, I had feared him. Now, his threats sounded empty. I turned and walked home. She wanted to start again in August. I chose Tsinghua University's mathematics and computer science program. Jingbei University was famous, but I no longer wanted to enter the place connected to my previous nightmare. My parents respected my decision. The school held a graduation celebration for me. Chin Fong gave me a new blue notebook. You lost one research notebook. Use this one to record your new future. I held it carefully. Thank you. Teacher Chun. Zhou Jing was admitted to a university in Shanghai. Before leaving, she hugged me. I knew you weren't a plagiarist. You were the only one. That's not true. She smiled. Your parents believed you. Teacher Chin believed you. And more importantly, you believed yourself. Her words stayed with me. The night before I left Haicheng, someone knocked on our door. Shen Mengyao stood outside. She had cut her long hair short. She wore an ordinary t-shirt and carried no designer bag. For the first time, she looked like a normal 18-year-old girl. I'm going to repeat my final year. I nodded. The Education Bureau allowed it? Yes. Because she had cooperated with the investigation and provided messages from Gui Chen. She was not permanently banned from the examination. She could begin again. She looked past me at the packed suitcases in the living room. You're leaving tomorrow? Yes. Tsinghua University? Yes. Her fingers tightened. I used to think everything came easily to you. It didn't. I know that now. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she asked, Did you ever consider warning me? No, her eyes dimmed. Not even once. I remembered our childhood. We had shared textbooks. When her family could not afford them, I had waited outside the hospital. When her father underwent surgery, on winter mornings, she brought me hot soy milk. Perhaps some of those memories had been real. But rebirth did not turn a kind person evil. It only gave Shin Mengyao the opportunity to reveal what she had always wanted. You were reborn, with memories of my success. I said quietly, You didn't ask whether I was happy. You didn't ask how I received the recommendation. You only thought about taking it. She lowered her head. I was jealous. I know. I thought if I replaced you, everyone would finally see me. They did see you. Her face tightened. I continued. But you didn't show them your ability. You showed them your greed. She stood silently for a long time. Then she looked up. Do you hate me? In my previous life, yes. And now? I thought about it. No, her eyes widened. I don't need to hate you. I already took back everything that belonged to me. You'll have to live with the choices you made. That is enough. She laughed bitterly. You really did change. So did you. She turned to leave. After taking 2 steps, she stopped. Lin Shi. What? If I take the examination next year and enter a good university through my own ability, she hesitated. Will you forgive me? I looked at her back. Whether you study again is your choice. Whether you change is also your choice. But forgiveness is mine. I don't owe it to you. Her shoulders trembled slightly. She nodded. Then she walked away. I closed the door. My mother came out of the kitchen. Are you sad? A little. She touched my hair. Some friendships are like examination questions. You can work very hard and still choose the wrong answer. But once you see the correct answer, you shouldn't make the same mistake again. I smiled. You're right. The next morning, my parents and I boarded the train to Beijing. As Haiqing disappeared behind us, I opened the blue notebook Chen Fang had given me. On the first page, I wrote, "My name is Lin Shi. I once believed someone else could steal my future. Then I learned that a future built through my own choices cannot be taken away." I closed the notebook and looked out of the window. Sunlight spread across the distant fields. In my previous life, I died before the examination results were released. I died believing my name would always be associated with shame. This time, my name appeared at the top of the score list. My parents sat beside me. My admission notice rested safely inside my bag, and the girl who stole my recommendation finally understood the truth. She had never stolen my future. She had only stolen the trap meant for me. Epilogue, 3 years later. I returned to Haiqing as a representative of Tsinghua University's student research team. Our project had developed a low-cost mathematical model for improving water distribution in rural schools. The city invited us to present our results at an education conference. The conference was held in the same auditorium where Shen Mingyao's plagiarism had once been exposed. Before my presentation, I stood backstage and looked at the giant screen. This time, my name appeared alone. Lead researcher, Lin Shi. No one could remove it. No one could transfer it. No one could claim it belonged to a powerful student. Every formula, every report, and every line of code had been independently verified. Senior Lin, a young volunteer approached me. She wore the uniform of Haiqing No. 1 High School. "Someone outside wants to see you." I walked into the corridor. Shen Mengyao stood by the window. She looked calmer than before. After repeating her final year, she had achieved a respectable examination score and entered a provincial normal university. I had heard she was studying chemistry education. "Congratulations." She looked at the conference poster. "Your project is better than the one I stole." "It should be. I finally understand the original project now." She laughed at herself. "It took me 2 years of chemistry classes to understand how ridiculous my presentation was." I said nothing. She took an envelope from her bag. Inside was the money my parents had once lent her family. "We finally repaid everything. You could have transferred it. I wanted to give it to you personally." I accepted the envelope. She looked toward the auditorium. "Gu Yichen was sentenced last month." I heard. "Professor Gao received a longer sentence." "Yes. Principal Gu's case is still ongoing." I nodded. She was silent for a moment. "I used to think their punishment would make me happy. It didn't." "No." She looked at her hands. "I realized that even without them, I was still responsible for what I did." "That realization took you long enough." She smiled bitterly. "Yes." The staff called my name from backstage. I turned to leave. "Lin Shi." I stopped. "I'm sorry." This time, there was no excuse. After the apology, no request for forgiveness, no attempt to blame jealousy, pressure, or Gu Yichen. Only 2 words. I looked at her. "I heard you." Then I entered the auditorium. Applause rose from every direction. My parents sat in the front row. Chen Fang sat beside them. Zhou Jing waved at me from the aisle. I stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, but I was no longer afraid of being seen. I opened my presentation. "Good morning. My name is Lin Shi. 3 years ago, I learned that talent alone cannot protect a student. A fair system must also protect every young person's right to own their work, make their own choices, and pursue their future without coercion." The screen behind me displayed our research results. I continued speaking. My voice was steady. Outside the auditorium, Shen Mengyao quietly walked away. I did not watch her leave. Some people were part of my past. Some pain had taught me how to protect myself, but neither deserved to control the rest of my life. When the presentation ended, the audience stood and applauded. My mother wiped her eyes. My father raised his phone to take a photograph. I smiled at them. In my previous life, I had died beneath accusations and flashing cameras. In this life, I stood beneath the same lights. With my head held high, I had regained my education, my research, my reputation, my family's happiness, and most importantly, I had regained the right to decide where my life would go. This time, No one could steal it. Story 2. The old radiator under the dorm window gave its sudden knocking clank as the heating kicked on. 2 hard knocks, and a hiss, and that was the thing that told me. It was the specific clank and hiss of that ancient radiator under the window of my room in Hartwell Hall. 2 hard metallic knocks as the pipes filled. Then the long, settling hiss, a sound I had not heard in 11 years, and had forgotten was a sound at all. And, when it clanked across the small room, I went very still, and understood in the slow way you understand these things that I had been sent back. You forget the small things in the long, flat years. The wounds you keep, you can recite each one. But the clank of a dorm radiator on the first cold morning, the smell of the place, instant coffee, and damp brick, and laundry powder, and the particular dust of a hall of residence, the creak of a narrow bed frame, the hum of the corridor strip lights through the door, the gray campus morning through the single window, those go quietly, and then one morning they all come back at once, and you realize you are 18 years old again, sitting on the bed in my room in Hartwell Hall at the start of the year, my things half-packed, and that none of what came after this morning had happened yet. I let it arrive in pieces, the small room, with its narrow bed, and the desk under the window, the radiator clanking and hissing as the heating came on, the single window, with the gray campus morning behind it, my room key on the desk, the key to the room I'd been assigned, the good room, the one everything would turn on, the framed photograph of home propped on the windowsill, half and packed, the one that had pulped and curled in the flood the first time, and that I'd grieved and forgotten, standing dry and whole again in the morning light, the string of fairy lights I brought to make the room mine, still coiled on the bed, and then, last and heaviest, the knowledge of everything that came after this morning the first time, which landed so hard I had to grip the edge of the bed to keep from going down, and breathe, and wait for the room to stop tilting, and slowly right itself around me. Let me tell it in order. It's the only honest way to tell a thing that's happened to you twice. You have to understand about Genevieve first, because the whole of it turns on what she was. Genevieve was a girl on my corridor. We'd been assigned rooms near each other, thrown together by the lottery of first-year housing, the kind of proximity that's either the start of a friendship or the start of something else. And I learned too late which she was striking, and magnetic, and socially gifted, the kind of girl a hall arranged itself around, beloved by everyone, effortless, with people in exactly the way that fairness and decency are not effortless, with everyone. She had charm the way some people have money, total, easy, the thing that opened every door. But the decency didn't come to her the way the charm did, the quiet fairness of not taking what wasn't yours, of not wrecking someone else's things to get what you wanted. The thing that mattered that first week was the room I'd been assigned, the good room, the one everyone wanted, the corner room, with the better light, and the quiet, and the view, the room that made the whole year better. It had come to me fairly by the assignment, by luck, and the housing lottery, and it was mine, and Genevieve wanted it the way she wanted everything that was better than what she had, and she decided in the way people like her decide that it ought to be hers, that she deserved it more, that she'd find a way to make it hers. So she didn't accept the assignment or ask fairly or let it go. She did the thing she did. Here's what happened the first time. The part one assembled only later in the wreckage. Genevieve wanted my room. And, when I wouldn't simply hand it over, when I declined politely to swap my good room for her lesser one, she did something I could never have imagined someone doing. She flooded it, sabotaged my room, caused a flood, water everywhere, my things ruined, the room damaged, and unlivable, engineered so that my good room became a disaster, so that I'd be displaced, moved out, forced out of the room she couldn't talk me out of. She wrecked the thing she couldn't have so that I couldn't have it either. That wasn't quite the whole of the betrayal, though. The whole of it was what she did to cover it, and how completely it worked. Because, when my room flooded, when the water came, and the damage was done, and I was displaced, Genevieve, beloved, and quick, and socially gifted, positioned herself perfectly. She made sure it looked like an accident, or worse, like my fault, that I'd left a tap running, left a window open in the rain, done something careless that caused the flood myself. And she was the first to be sympathetic, the first to help, the first to suggest, gently, that perhaps I just wasn't suited to that room, that maybe a swap would be best now anyway, that she'd be happy to take it off my hand since it needed sorting out. And the hall, who adored her, who found her so warm and helpful, who found me the quieter, careless one, who'd somehow flooded her own room, believed her version. The flood was my carelessness. Genevieve was the kind friend helping me through it. And wasn't it sensible now for her to take the damaged room and sort it out, and for me to move to her lesser one? And it worked. I lost the room, moved out, displaced, my things damaged, relocated to the worst room, while Genevieve took the good one once it was repaired, exactly as she'd wanted, and I was marked quietly as the careless girl who'd flooded her own room, the one who couldn't be trusted with nice things, while Genevieve was the gracious friend who'd helped and then generously taken the damaged room off my hands. The theft was complete, and it looked like a kindness. I remember coming back to it with the clarity that never fades, the way the worst small disasters of a life never quite blur. Opening my door to the water across the floor into my things, my books swollen, and my papers pulped, and the photographs I brought from home curling and ruined, and the slow, sick understanding that the room was unlivable, that I'd have to move, that everything had a smell of wet plaster that wouldn't leave, and Genevieve there almost at once, her face all sympathy. "Oh no. Oh, you poor thing. What happened? Did you leave a tap? Oh, don't worry. These things happen. I'll help you sort it." So warm, so helpful, already steering it, that I must have done something that it was such a shame that maybe the room just wasn't lucky for me that she'd take it off my hands once it was fixed, so I wouldn't have to deal with the bother. And I half believed her even, because who floods a room on purpose? Who does that? And the more I wondered aloud whether someone had done it, the more I sounded like a careless girl casting around for someone to blame. That was the genius of it. It looked like nothing. It looked like my own carelessness. And her kindness. There was no villain anyone could see. The hall's accommodation officer, who oversaw the rooms, and their assignment, a precise, observant woman named Miss Calder, who had once told me I was the most straightforward and honest student on the corridor, looked at me, afterward, with a disappointment that cut, because she'd thought well of me, and the flood I'd apparently caused had made her doubt it. She didn't say much. She just stopped seeing me the way she had, which from her was a small death. I'm not going to walk you through the rest of that year or the ones after. To lose the room that was yours, to be marked as the careless one who flooded it herself, to be quietly moved aside while the charming girl took what she'd wrecked, is a small sentence that becomes a large one. The room gone, the standing gone, the start of everything soured, because the story attached to my name was careless, can't be trusted, and all of it done by the girl who flooded my room with a sympathetic smile. There is a particular cruelty in being robbed by someone who then comforts you about the robbery, in having your own loss handed back to you as your own fault, while the one who caused it dabs your eyes and offers so generously to take the ruined thing off your hands. The thing that was fairly mine, the good room, became the instrument of my displacement, wrecked, and turned into the evidence that I was careless, and the start of a long-going small that I'd rather leave at the edge of his telling. While somewhere Genevieve woke each morning in the corner light she'd flooded me out of. And that's where the years went, one quiet season after another, and that's where they ended in a way I won't dwell on. By then there'd be no one to notice for a long while. And then there was the clank and hiss of the radiator, 2 hard knocks as the pipes filled, then the long, settling hiss, and the coffee and damp brick smell of the hall, and my room key on the desk. And I was 18 years old, and alive in my good room at the start of the year. The flood not yet set, and Genevieve not yet a saboer, and the whole thing still ahead of me, and a knowledge in my chest I intended this time to use. I did not resolve to simply guard my room, to never leave it to watch it every second, so Genevieve could never get in, which some panicked part of me wanted to do. I gripped the bed frame and made myself think instead all the way to the end of a thing the way the first version of me never had. The obvious move was to protect the room, to guard it, Watch it. Keep her out. But I understood now that the obvious move was the wrong one. For the same reason it's always wrong. With people like Genevieve, if I suddenly grew watchful and barred her, she'd notice, and she'd find another moment, another way. A hall is full of access, comingings and goings, unwatched hours, and a determined saboteur who's decided to wreck your room will find an opening. I couldn't guard it every second of every day. And worse, guarding the room wouldn't fix the deeper thing. Even if I protected it perfectly, the first life ruin wasn't only the flood, it was the invisibility of it, the way it looked like my own carelessness, so that I was displaced and blamed, with no trace of what she'd done. And even the swap she'd wanted came wrapped as a kindness. Guarding the room didn't expose the saboteur. It just left her free to try again, beloved and clean. So, I wasn't going to merely guard my room. And I certainly wasn't going to do the thing some wounded part of me first reached for to somehow turn the flood back on her to arrange for her to be the one soaked and displaced. That was the cruel version. And it was also the wrong version. Because it would make me the saboteur, the one engineering damage. And it would prove every careless and untrustworthy thing she'd say about me. I wasn't going to flood anyone or steer any water at anyone or wreck anyone's things. Nobody was going to be harmed or soaked or damaged at all. I was going to do something better. The thing the second life had handed me. The thing that turned her sabotage into her own undoing. And the thing that mattered most to me. I was going to make sure that her flooding, the thing that had been invisible the first time, became visible, became the evidence that exposed her. While I simply plainly refused to swap, kept my room, and made certain no flood ever ruined anyone's anything. Because it would be caught. Before it could, because here was the gift, the thing I understood now that I hadn't. Then Genevieve was going to try to flood my room. It was her move, the thing she'd already decided to do, the sabotage she'd built her whole scheme around. And the thing about her plan was that it depended entirely on the flooding staying invisible, on it looking like my carelessness, on no one ever seeing the act, on the damage doing her work for her, while she stayed the kind, helpful friend. The whole power of it was in the dark, which meant the way to unmake it wasn't only to refuse the swap, it was to make the flooding scene, to let her attempt her sabotage, and to make certain that attempt was caught, documented, intercepted, turned into the one thing she never intended it to be, evidence, proof of exactly what she'd done, and the refusal was the key that turned her toward the act. Because if I simply, firmly refused to swap rooms, kept my good room, declined her every angle to get me out of it, then the only way left for her to get the room was the flood, the sabotage, the wrecking. My refusal would funnel her, as it had the first time, toward the one move that this time would be caught. She'd try to flood the room. I wouldn't give up, certain it would look like my carelessness the way it had before, and instead, her attempt would be documented, intercepted, seen, and it would become the proof of what she was. So, I wouldn't swap, and I wouldn't merely guard, and I wouldn't harm anyone. I'd refuse the swap plainly, keep my room, and arrange quietly in advance, with the one observant officer for any flooding or water sabotage on that corridor to be watched for, caught, and documented as the deliberate act it was, rather than written off as a careless girl's accident. Her attempt, committed in what she thought was the dark, would be the very thing that exposed her. Because a sabotage that's caught instead of hidden isn't a weapon, it's a confession. And Genevieve, certain the flooding would stay invisible the way it had every time she'd relied on people's trust, would never imagine that the act she set would be the thing that convicted her. The trap wasn't aimed at her or at anyone's body or anyone's things. Nobody was going to be flooded or harmed at all. It was aimed at the dark she relied on. She would choose freely to flood the room rather than accept the assignment. And to do it blind, never imagining the act could be seen. And that choice made visible would be the whole of her undoing. I'd keep my room dry, and mine. She'd attempt a flood that would be caught before it ruined anything. And her sabotage would land on her, because a flooding that's documented instead of hidden exposes the one who said it. And Genevieve would never imagine the dark she worked in could be turned to light. And I want to be precise about the distinction, because it mattered to me more than almost anything. And it was the whole of what the second life had taught me. I was not doing to her what she had done to me. I was not flooding anyone's room, not steering water at anyone, not wrecking a single thing of hers, not arranging for her to wake under a leak or be soaked or displaced. Nobody would be harmed. The plan was the opposite of hers. Hers worked by causing damage in the dark and pinning it on me. Mine worked by making sure no damage happened at all, and that her attempt to cause it, her act, freely chosen, was simply seen. And if Genevieve had accepted the fair assignment, kept to her own room, left mine alone, nothing I'd done would have touched her. My refusal would have been just a polite no, and she'd have lived her year in her own room, untroubled. The trap only sprang if she did the one thing she had no right to do, try to flood a room to force me out of it, and it only exposed her, because she chose to do it in the dark, which is to say, it exposed her on exactly the act that made her a Sabodao, and on nothing else. An honest student, who simply wanted a nicer room, and took no for an answer, would never have been caught by any of it. Only someone who'd wreck another person's room to take it could be undone by the wrecking being seen. The trap harmed no one, and caught no innocent. It caught precisely the person who floods, because she can't get a thing fairly. And it caught her, with her own hand on her own act, with nothing damaged, and no one soaked, because she could not imagine that the dark she counted on could ever be turned to evidence. But I am careful, and I had died once of being insufficiently careful. So I built the proof side of it, with great deliberateness, because the evidence was the plan this time. And I wanted it airtight, both that her attempt would be caught and documented, and that if it came to the reversal, the truth of who did what would be unmistakable, and my own refusal to swap on the record as reasonable and calm. I went, before any of it, to Miss Sayre, the accommodation officer, the one who thought well of me, and then doubted me the first time. She was precise and observant, and cared about the fair running of her hall the way some people care about a creed. Because a student displaced by sabotage dressed as accident, she often said, was a small injustice that rotted a whole corridor since the record prospered, and the wronged carried the blame. In my first life she'd been the one whose doubt cut not from malice, but because the flood had looked exactly like my carelessness, and she'd had no reason to think otherwise. This time I came to her not as a future careless girl, but as a straightforward student raising a concern, before anything had happened, and the conversation was a door I was opening on purpose on a hinge I'd learned about in a life she'd never remember. Miss called her, I said, finding her in the accommodation office that first week. I'd like to confirm something about my room, and put a couple of things on the record if that's all right. It might seem over-careful, but I'd rather have it down. She looked up. With a precise, observant attention, she gave everything. Of course. Go on. I've been assigned a corner room, fairly by the housing lottery, and I'm happy in it, and intend to keep it. I said another student would like to swap with me for it, and I want it on the record dated that I've declined the swap calmly, with no ill will, simply because the room was fairly assigned to me, and I want to keep it. I'd like that noted, so there's no confusion later about my position. He hit his eyes. And second, I've become aware of a danger I'd never thought about. Rooms can be interfered with, damaged, flooded, even by someone who wants a person moved out, and it can be made to look exactly like the occupant's own carelessness. A tap left running, a window left open, so that the person is displaced and blamed, and the one who did it stays clean, even ends up with the room. I'm not accusing anyone, but I'd like it on record, dated, that I've raised this concern in advance, that I'm worried about deliberate water damage being disguised as my carelessness. And I'd ask, if anything floods or is interfered with on this corridor, would you treat it as a possible deliberate act, and have it looked at properly, caught, documented, investigated, rather than just assuming the occupant was careless? Because a flood that's caught and documented tells you who really did it. I'd much rather it be caught than disguised. Miss Sayre's observant expression sharpened, the attention of a precise woman hearing a danger she'd seen play out before, named precisely. That is a remarkably perceptive thing to raise. She said slowly, and you're entirely right that it's a vulnerability. Deliberate damage disguised as a student's carelessness is one of the uglier things that happens over a contested room. Precisely. because it's so often invisible. The occupant displaced, the blame on her, the schemer helpful, and clean. I felt helpless against exactly that more than once. And I've disliked the helplessness. She stuttered me. Yes, I'll know both things. Dated. First, that you've declined a room swap calmly, and reasonably, wishing to keep a room fairly assigned to you. That's on record now. Clearly. And second, your concern about deliberate water damage disguised as carelessness. And I commit to this. If anything floods or is tampered with on this corridor, I will not simply assume the occupant was careless. I'll treat it as a possible deliberate act. Have it looked at, documented, the cause, and the access investigated. A flood that's caught will not be written off as a careless girl's accident. It will be treated as what it is. And I'll keep a closer eye on that corridor than I otherwise might. She made the note, dated it, and I watched her write it. Why raise it now? Go. Has something happened? Nothing I can prove. I said simply, I'd just rather have my refusal to swap on record, and the danger flagged in advance in the light than be displaced, and blamed later in the dark, after someone more charming than me has wrecked my room, and called it my carelessness. The truth of what happens on this corridor should be visible, caught, documented, not assumed away. Miss Kerr nodded slowly, with something close to respect, and something graver underneath. That's exactly right, and it's wiser than most students twice your age. It's noted, dated, your reasonable refusal to swap, and your concern about disguised sabotage. If anything floods, we catch it, document it, investigate it. We don't assume carelessness. That's a promise. She filed it, and I watched her file it. A flood that's hidden is a careless girl's accident. A flood that's caught is a saboteur's confession. We'll make sure any flooding here is the second kind. That's the whole of it. In the end, I had it both halves, and the most important half airtight. The certainty that her attempt would be caught, and documented, and turned into evidence rather than disguised, with no flood ever ruining anyone's anything. Plus the dated record that fixed my reasonable refusal to swap, and flagged the danger in advance, and committed the one observant officer to treating a flood as a deliberate act. I'd taken the thing that displaced me the first time, the invisible sabotage, the flood blamed on my carelessness, the swap wrapped as a kindness, and arranged for the flooding to be made visible, caught, and turned against the one who said it, with no one harmed. Because this time, when she tried to flood my room, the attempt itself would be the evidence, and the right woman already knew to catch it rather than assume. I thanked her, and went back to my room, with the trap laid, the trap of the light, the trap of the court confession, and my refusal plain, and on record, before Genevieve had said a thing. Genevieve came by my room that first week, the way she did, when she wanted something, drifting in, with the warmth, and the dazzle she used on everyone, her eyes moving casually, so casually over the room, the corner, the light, the thing she wanted. Oh, this room, she said, fond, leaning in the doorway, her gaze sweeping the corner, the window, the view. It's gorgeous, so much better than mine. I got stuck, with that dingy one down the hall, no light right by the noisy stairwell. You're so lucky. She let the warmth wrap around the next part, light coaxing. You know, I was going to say, would you ever think about swapping? You're so easygoing. You'd be happy anywhere. And this room would mean so much to me. We could swap. It would be so easy. What do you say? And there was something underneath the coaxing I could read now, and couldn't then. A flicker of calculation. The cool weighing of a person who'd already decided that if the asking didn't work, something else would. There it was. The opening move of my first displacement. The warmth. The appraising eyes on my room. That you'd be happy anywhere. Would you ever swap? It would be so easy. The coaxing that, when it failed, would curdle into the flood. The move she'd built her. Whole scheme around. And the fork in it. Give her the room, or be made to lose it. The first time I declined to gently, but only gently, apologetically, leaving the door open. Never imagining that my refusal would root her to sabotage. Never imagining the flood. This time, I knew exactly where the would you ever swap led. When it failed. To the flooding. The displacement. The blame. And I knew that the worst move was to be wishy-washy. to leave it open, to invite her to keep working on me, and that the second worst was to accuse her of something she hadn't done yet. So, I gave her the answer that was plain, calm, final, and on the record, a clean refusal that closed the door on the asking, and routed her exactly as I needed toward the one move that would now be caught. "That's really kind of you to ask," I said, warm, but entirely clear. "But no, I'm going to keep this room. It was assigned to me, and I'm happy here. So, I'm not going to swap. I hope you get a better one if something opens up." I held it there, friendly and immovable. No hypothesis, no opening, no wiggle room. The plain refusal I'd already put on record. With Miss Sayre. "But honestly, this one's mine. I'm staying put." And I watched it land, watched the coaxing warmth flicker, watched the calculation move behind her eyes, watched her file my plain refusal as exactly what I needed her to file it as the door to the easy way closed the room you ungettable by asking the fork turn toward the other way. Because I hadn't been wishy-washy, and I hadn't accused her of anything I'd refused, plainly calmly on record. And in doing so I'd routed her, just as the first time toward the flood, except that this time the flood would be caught, documented, turned into the proof of what she was. She tried to wreck the room. She couldn't talk me out of certain it would look like my carelessness the way it had every time she'd relied on the dark. And it would be seen instead, and become the evidence. I'd given her the plain refusal, knowing it would root her to the act, knowing the act would be caught, knowing her own choice to flood rather than accept the assignment would be the whole of her undoing. "Oh," she said, the warmth thinning, the disappointment that wasn't quite disappointment moving across her lovely face. "No, of course. I understand. It's your room. Forget I asked." And then lighter, recovering the charm, sliding back into place over the calculation. "We should still hang out though. I don't know what I'd do without a friend on the corridor. I don't know what I'd do without a friend on the corridor." She had no idea how the meaning would reverse. She had no idea that my plain refusal had just routed her toward the one move that would expose her. That the flood she'd set in what she thought was the dark would be caught, documented, turned into the proof of exactly what she'd done. Or that the straightforward girl smiling at her from the doorway of the good room had spent the week making certain that the act she set would be the thing that convicted her. And that her sabotage was already flagged, dated, with the one officer who treated a flood as a confession. She thought she'd found the room, you gettable by asking, and was already turning toward the other way. She'd found the act that would convict her, and chosen it freely, because she'd rather flood a room than accept a fair assignment, and couldn't imagine the dark she worked in could ever be turned to light. It happened the way I knew it would, the way it had the first time, the asking having failed, the room you gettable by charm. Genevieve turning, just as she had before, toward the other way. The flood, the sabotage, she was certain would look like my carelessness, and force me out of the room she couldn't talk me out of. I didn't have to catch her in the act myself. That wasn't the plan, and watching too obviously would have warned her. The plan was quieter, and surer than that. I'd refused the swap, plainly on record. I'd flagged the danger to Miss Sayre dated, and I'd arranged for exactly this, for any flooding or water sabotage on the corridor to be watched for, caught, and documented as the deliberate act. It was rather than written off as a careless girl's accident. The corridor was being kept a closer eye on than Genevieve could know. The concern was on file, and so, when she did it, when she set the flood, she was certain would stay invisible the way it had the first time. The way everything she did stayed invisible. The act did not disappear into my carelessness. It was caught, and documented, and intercepted, before it could ruin a single thing of mine. While my room stayed dry, and mine, the flooding she set in what she thought was the dark became in the moment it was caught. The one thing she never imagined it could be not a weapon that displaced me, but evidence proof of exactly what she'd done. I want to tell this part carefully, because it matters that it wasn't cruel, and nobody was harmed, and the reckoning that came for Genevieve was simply her own act being dragged gently and completely into the light. It was just a saboteur's secret deed turned into a witness against her. My room never flooded. Not really. Not the way it had the first time. The attempt was caught before it could do its work. The tampering, the deliberate cause, identified and documented for what it was, rather than left to soak through my things. And my standing. No water ruined my books or popped my papers or curled the photograph from home this time. No smell of wet plaster. No displacement. The thing that had wrecked my whole start the first time simply didn't happen, because it was caught in the setting. And instead of damage, there was a record, a documented, deliberate water sabotage on the corridor, intercepted, with the cause, and the access laid out plainly, and documented. It told the truth. The flooding had been deliberate, set, caused, engineered. That was a fact now. A recorded fact, not an invisible thing disguised as my carelessness. The sabotage that had been the perfect invisible crime. In the first time was this time a caught and documented act sitting in the light. Proof that someone had deliberately tried to flood a room. And the question that proof raised, who had only one honest answer, because the machinery I'd set up answered it, who wanted the room, who had been refused the swap, plainly on record days, before, who had access to the corridor, the opportunity, the motive, the documented desire for exactly that room. The answer was Genevieve, because the evidence pointed, where it truly pointed, not framed, not planted, but genuinely hers. She had genuinely set the flood in pursuit of a room she'd genuinely been refused. And the court act genuinely proved that someone had deliberately tried to wreck the room she wanted. The Sabbath deed, committed in what she thought was the dark, was now a documented fact in the light, pointing at the only person who'd wanted the room badly enough to wreck it, and been told no. Genevieve had set a flood to commit the perfect invisible displacement, and instead had produced, with her own hands, the perfect piece of evidence against herself, a confession in water caught. Before it could become a weapon, the recognition moved through the hall the way these things move. The flooding caught and documented. The investigation Miss Sayre had promised, swinging into motion the deliberate cause, the access, the motive, the refused swap, all on record, and it pointed cleanly and undeniably at Genevieve, the beloved girl, the charming one, the one everyone adored, revealed as the person who tried to flood a corridor mate's room to take it, caught by the very act she'd been certain would stay invisible. And nobody was harmed. That was the thing that mattered most. The thing I'd built the whole plan around. My room stayed dry. My things stayed whole. No one was soaked. No one displaced. No one's belongings ruined. Not mine. And not Genevieve's either. The flood that was meant to wreck my room wrecked nothing, because it had been caught instead of allowed to happen. The only thing the sabotage damaged was Genevieve, and it damaged her not by harming anyone, but by being seen, by being the documented act that exposed exactly what she'd done. Genevieve, of course, reached for the reversal, because some version of the reversal was the move that had worked the first time, the move that had displaced me under the story that I was careless. She tried, even in the wreckage, to turn it, to say that I'd done it, that I'd staged the whole thing, flooded it myself, or faked it to frame her, that I was the one who'd set it up to destroy her, that she was the victim of my scheme. And this time, it found nothing to stand on, because this time, the truth was a documented act in the light, fixed in advance, and pointing only one way, because Miss Sayre, I was told, afterward, laid out what she already knew, what she'd recorded, before any of it, before any of this. She said in essence, a student came to me and did two things dated on record. She declined a room swap calmly and reasonably, wishing to keep a room fairly assigned to her. And she raised a specific concern that deliberate water damage might be set, and disguised as her own carelessness, and asked that any flooding be caught and investigated rather than assumed. She flagged this in advance, when she had nothing to gain, when no flood had happened. And here is what your accusation requires me to believe, that she flooded her own room, the dry room she had just insisted in writing on keeping in order to frame you. But she kept the room. She wanted the room. She refused to leave it. Why would she wreck the very thing she just fought to keep? You are the one who wanted it. You are the one who was refused the swap days ago on record. You are the one, with the motive the documents show. A student who floods her own room to frame someone does not first come to me dated predicting the exact sabotage and asking that it be caught. The person who raised this in advance is not the person who did it. The person who wanted the room and was told no is the matter is not close. And when Genevieve tried again. Because charm was all she had. Because it was the only tool she'd ever needed. When she insisted she'd been set up, that the whole thing was a trap. Miss Eyre said the thing that ended it. No one made you set a flood. Refusing to swap a room is not a crime. Flooding one is she was under no obligation to give you her room. And under no obligation to leave it unguarded against you. She was under no obligation to be sabotaged at all. That she kept the room you wanted does not mean you had to wreck it. You did that. The trap, if you want to call it that, was simply that you were allowed to attempt the thing you chose to attempt. And that this time it was caught instead of disguised. The only person who set a flood here is the one who said it. The matter is not close. The reframe didn't just fail. It turned over in the air and became its own confession. The confession of a girl who had tried to flood a corridor mate's room to take it, certain it would look like carelessness, and instead had produced the documented evidence of her own deliberate act in front of an officer holding a dated record that the victim had seen it coming in a refused swap that gave her motive in writing. Genevieve was found to have deliberately set a flood to force a corridor made out of her room, established not by a disguise this time, but by the court and documented act, by the motive on record, by the dated concern, and finally by her own failed attempt to reframe it. The finding went on to her record, the serious permanent kind that follows a person through a hall. And beyond it, the room she'd schemed for was never hers, and never would be, and nothing touched me, because there was nothing to touch. I kept my room dry, refused the swap reasonably, flagged the danger in advance, and committed no act against anyone. I'd simply declined to give up a room that someone freely chose to try to wreck. The same fate that displaced me the first time. The lost room, the careless girl, Mark, the quiet moving aside, landed this time on the right person. The one who set the flood, exposed by the flooding itself, and the room stayed mine. Dry, whole, fairly assigned, and kept. The corner light, and the quiet, and the view. The good start the first life had soured, restored now, because the sabotage that wrecked it the first time was this time a court act pointing at the one who said it. Genevieve found me in the corridor. Afterward, after it was all known, I'd half expected it. She came toward me, and the dazzle was gone. Not failed, not cracked, simply absent, switched off, because there was no longer a hall to charm. Her lovely face was blotched and swollen, and for the first time since I'd known her, the devastation on it was real, because it served no audience and no purpose. She wasn't performing it at anyone. She was just inside it. You knew, she said. You knew I'd flood it. You refused the swap. You knew I'd caught. You set it up so it would be. Do you want to sit? I said there's a bench by the stairwell. She didn't move. How did you know? You went to call her first. You flagged it. You put the refusal on record. Her voice cracked. How could you possibly have known to do all of that? There's no answer to how did you know that I could give her not the true one, which lived in a flooded room in a long erosion, in a place where the years went and ended. So, I gave her the other truth, the smaller one that was no less true. I knew you'd flood it the moment you asked to swap, and I said, no. I said quietly, I could see it. You didn't want the room. You wanted it instead of me having it. And, when the asking failed, there was only one way left to get me out. You weren't going to take no for an answer. People like you never do. You were going to wreck what you couldn't have the way you always do in the dark, where it had looked like my carelessness, and you be the kind friend helping me move out. You hid his eyes. So, I didn't try to stop you. I just refused plainly, and made sure that, when you flooded it, the flood would be caught, and documented, and seen. Because the whole power of what you do is that it stays invisible. And the one thing you never imagined was that someone might refuse you on record, and arrange for your secret act to become evidence. I didn't flood anything. Genevieve, I didn't frame you. You really said it. I just made sure the thing you did in the dark happened in the light, with nothing damaged, and no one harmed. The trap was never something I did to you. It was the refusal. And the light. You walked into it, because you'd rather flood a room than accept a fair no. And a saboteur, who stakes everything on the dark, has no answer. When the dark turns to evidence, that was the truest thing I had it in me to say. And it was a kind of mercy, because the deeper truth was not a weapon I needed, and not a weight she could carry. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I braced almost out of habit for the old script. The tears, the dazzling, wounded reframe. But she was too undone for it or too tired. Or for the first time since I'd known her, too exposed to manage it. I always counted on no one seeing, she said. Flat and bare and wondering. That's the thing. My whole life. When I couldn't get a thing fairly, I wrecked it or took it or made it look like the other person's fault. And no one ever caught me. Because I was so good at being like that. No one ever looked. And I started to believe the dark was just mine. That I could do anything in it. And come out the kind one. She looked at me. I set that flood. Without a second thought. Because I was so sure no one would ever see. You'd have let me the first time. Why didn't you this time? And there it was. The whole of it. Said out loud. Not why did you betray me? Not what did I do to deserve this? Not I'm sorry. Just why did the girl, whose dark I always worked, and finally turned the light on. I'd spend a whole erased life imagining what I'd say to her if I ever got the chance. And now the chance was here. And the speeches had no weight in my hands. They'd been ballasted for a sinking person. And I wasn't sinking anymore. Because letting you work in the dark was never kindness. I said it was just me losing my room. And carrying the blame for wrecking it again. And again. So your act stayed invisible. And you stayed the liked one. And I became the careless girl. Who couldn't keep nice things. I stopped letting it stay dark. I refused you plainly in the light. And made sure that if you wrecked what you couldn't have, the wrecking would be seen. Caught. Documented. And land on you instead of me. I didn't flood anyone. Genevieve. I just stopped being the place your sabotage disappeared into. And made sure the next time you set one, the act itself would be the witness. I let it settle. That's the only thing that changed. I turned the light on. The room was never really the point. The dark was. And a thing done in the dark is only a secret until someone makes it visible. You set a flood to commit an invisible crime. You never imagined the act itself could be the one thing that saw you. But a sabotage that's caught instead of disguised as a confession. And the confession was yours. She stared at me for a long moment. Something moved behind the swollen eyes. Not understanding. I think people like Genevieve don't learn from consequences. Consequences only teach them to find a darker dark. A place even harder to see into a victim. Who won't think to flag it. But something moved there. Maybe just the dawning recognition that this one thing, the working in the dark that had carried her whole life, had finally been turned in a single court flood into the light. Then she turned and walked away, and she didn't look back. And I stood in the corridor while the radiator ticked behind my door and waited to feel the old thing. The wish to see the beloved girl brought low. The years of being the careless displaced one in her warm shadow. And it wasn't there. It had burned off somewhere in the quiet of the court act. Because I hadn't done anything to her at all. I had only refused her plainly and made her own sabotage visible. And let her own choice to flood rather than accept a fair no be the whole of it. It had closed over quietly, completely, the way a hall goes still late at night, and the only sound is a radiator ticking down behind a dry, undamaged door. And there was no ache where the old resentment had been, which surprised me more than anything, because the first time around that resentment had been most of the shape of my whole life. I won't pretend Genevieve learned. I'd watched her across 2 lives, and I knew better than to dress the truth up in comfort. People like her don't revise themselves. They only revise their hiding places, and even that only, when forced. The lesson she'd take from this, if she took one at all, would not be accept a fair no. Don't wreck what you can't have. It will be find a darker dark. A victim, who won't flag it. And she'd spend her life wrecking the things she couldn't get fairly in places she thought no one could see. And finding slowly that the dark she'd counted on her whole life keeps fewer secrets than she believed, because the world has more witnesses than charm can blind. What I can tell you is what became of her, the way these things reach you. When a hall is small, the court flood did its quiet work. The room was never hers, the finding a permanent mark, and the corridor that had arranged itself around her charm rearranged itself slowly around the knowledge of what she'd done in the dark. The charm still worked on strangers for while on people who hadn't heard, but the people who'd been on that corridor remembered the way you remember the light girl, who turned out to flood rooms, and her old method, the wrecking in the dark, deployed in a world that had learned to keep a light on, served her less and less, because charm had never once set a flood she'd set, and the truth of what she did was the only thing that ever really counted. And it was the one thing she'd spent her life making sure no one saw until a court flood saw it for everyone. I didn't feel triumphant, and I want to be honest about that, because there's no triumph in watching anyone's secret act exposed, even a sabotage. I felt the way you feel watching hard weather from inside a warm house, an acknowledgement that the storm is real and cold, and underneath it the quiet, steady fact that you are no longer standing out in it, that you stopped offering yourself up to it, that you came inside and closed the door, and the door held, and that for once the person out in the weather was out there, because of what she'd chosen to do in the dark, not because of what had been done to me. The lesson, when I finally turned it over and looked at it, whole wasn't trust no one, and it certainly wasn't let the saboteur be exposed. It was something quieter, and it had taken me 2 lives to learn it. A saboteur stakes everything on the dark, on the act no one sees. She said a flood meant to stay invisible, and the one witness she couldn't charm was the act itself. A thing done in the dark is only a secret until someone makes it visible. And the sheest way to undo a person who works in the dark is not to fight her there, but to refuse her in the light, and turn the light on what she does next. For the whole of my first life, I believed that the danger was being sabotaged, that if I could just guard the room, watch it every second, I'd be safe, and that belief had displaced me, because I couldn't guard it every second, and, when she flooded it, the damage looked like my own carelessness, and even my own fault. What I'd never understood was that a saboteur like Genevieve doesn't really rely on my carelessness. She relies on the invisibility of her act on the dark, on no one ever seeing what she did. That reliance on the dark is the whole vulnerability, and it lives entirely in her. The first time her flooding stayed invisible, and I lost the room and carried the blame. The second time I let her flooding happen in the light-caught documented scene. And the same act, the same room, the same girl produced not my displacement, but her exposure, because the only thing that had changed was whether her act stayed in the dark or came into the light. And nobody was harmed either way. And there's one truth underneath, even that one, the one I bought, with the years that went and ended. The people who sabotage you in the dark are betting the dark will hold. That's the whole vulnerability, and it's theirs, not mine. Genevieve could only be undone by a court flood, because her entire method depended on her act never being seen. A thing she relied on so completely she couldn't imagine someone refusing her on record and arranging for the act to be caught. She didn't just fail to take my room. She demonstrated in a documented flood that she had never been able to get a thing fairly at all. That her whole life had depended on the dark holding, on no one ever looking, on the people she wronged carrying the blame. The difference between the displaced, careless girl and the one who kept her room was never the flood. It was whether her act stayed in the dark or came into the light. And the second time I refused her plainly and turned on the light and let her own act, freely chosen, be the whole of it, with no one harmed at all. I kept my room that year, dry, whole, fairly mine, the corner light, and the quiet, and the view. The good start the saboteur had soured the first time restored now, because I'd refused plainly and let the truth be caught. There was no question of carelessness, no quiet moving aside, no cloud, because there was nothing to cloud. I kept my room, refused the swap reasonably, and the flood that displaced me the first time was this time a court act pointing at the one who said it. Misser restored my standing in terms that became, in their quiet way, a vindication, a student whose honesty was proven not by her word against a charming sabotage, but by a dry, undamaged room beside a documented sabotage that told the truth no story could hide. She stopped me once near the end of the year in the corridor and looked at me for a long moment with the precise observant eyes that had run that hall for years, and until that autumn, never quite known how to tell sabotage from a student's bad luck. You came to me at the start of the year, she said, and put your reasonable refusal to swap on record, and warned me, dated, that someone might set a flood and disguise it as your carelessness, and asked that any flooding be caught and investigated rather than assumed. At the time, I thought it merely careful. Afterward, I understood it was something more, as though you knew somehow that refusing her would root her toward the flood, and that the only thing that could clear you and catch her was to make sure the act was seen instead of disguised. She paused, as though you'd once lost a room to a flood someone set, and been remembered as the careless girl, when the truth was that someone had wrecked your room to take it. Maybe I had. I said, "HM," she said, and studied me a moment longer, and did not press it. "Well, you taught me something I'll carry for the rest of my time in this hall. And it's this, that the cruelest sabotage is the kind that stays invisible, and wears the victim's carelessness as its disguise. And the way to defeat it is not to fight it in the dark, but to refuse plainly in the light, and make the act visible. To catch it, document it, let it become a confession. And you did it, without anyone coming to harm. You made certain no flood ruined a thing. Not yours, and not hers. A charming account survives until the act is caught and documented. You did nothing to her. You kept your own room, and refused her plainly, and let her choose. She undid herself by doing in what she thought was the dark the very thing the light was waiting for. She nodded once, and behind my door, the radiator clanked and hissed as the heating came on over a dry, undamaged room. A thing done in the dark is a secret until it's seen. You taught me to keep a light on. That's the whole of it. In the end, I walked out into the morning, past the room that had been wrecked out from under me, and now instead was mine, and dry, and whole. The first time I'd lived this, the saboteur had flooded my room in the dark, and ridden my displacement to the room she wanted, not because I'd been careless, but because the flooding was invisible, and a wrecked room looked like a careless girl's accident, and the swap she wanted came wrapped as a kindness. This time, I refused to swap dorm rooms. I just never told her the flood she said would be caught on record. Never told her that the sabotage she'd set in what she thought was the dark, certain it would look like my carelessness, and force me out, would be watched for, and caught, and documented, and turned into the proof of exactly what she'd done, with nothing ruined, and no one harmed, because I'd understood at last the one thing 2 lives had taught me, that a saboteur who stakes everything on the dark has no answer when the dark turns to light, and that the sheest way to undo her is not to fight her in the dark, but to refuse her plainly, and make her secret act visible. I refused the swap once, calmly, on record, and flagged the danger, dated, with the one officer who'd catch it, and let the refusal route her toward the flood she'd set in the dark. And I'd let one fact go unspoken to the girl who'd wrecked my room to take it, the fact that I knew, with a certainty number 18-year-old should have exactly what she'd set, and exactly how completely the setting would expose her, because she could no more imagine the dark turning to light than she could have accepted a fair no one plain refusal. And one court flood, one silence held. It turned out to be enough. It turned out to be the whole difference between the displaced careless girl and the one who kept her room, between the small years, where I went smaller, while the saboteur woke each morning in the light she'd flooded me out of, and the whole true life that was always in a fair assignment in a dry-kept room. Mine. A radiator had clanked me back into this life, and a court flood had kept me here, and between those 2 small things, 2 hard knocks of a pipe filling, and a sabotage that was seen instead of disguised, lay the entire distance between the 2 lives I'd been given, and all I'd had to do to cross it was refuse plainly, keep my own room, and turn on the light